Zektar stood on the bridge of the Crimson Talon and watched the stars blur past the viewing screen. His clawed hands gripped the command rail as he studied the mission reports one more time. The data made him shake his head in disbelief. These humans were supposed to be dangerous? The reports showed a species that had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. They had crude weapons and simple ships. Their technology looked like toys compared to Valdris military equipment. Zektar had conquered much stronger enemies with half the force he commanded today. "Commander, we are approaching the human territory," announced his weapons officer Dralvin. The younger Valdris warrior sounded bored. "Should we begin scanning for targets?" Zektar nodded slowly. "Run full tactical sweeps, but do not expect much resistance. High Command says these humans barely know how to fight in space." The Crimson Talon led a strike force of 12 vessels into the outer edge of human space. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. The Valdris had used the same force to conquer the Zelanian Empire just 2 years ago. The Zelanians had fought for 6 months before surrendering. These humans would probably last 6 days. The scanner operator, a female Valdris named Crystal, looked up from her station. "Commander, I am detecting a small convoy ahead. 3 cargo ships and 2 escort vessels." Zektar moved to the tactical display. The human ships appeared as small red dots on the screen. They were moving slowly through the asteroid belt near a gas giant. The escorts looked old and poorly armed. This would be an easy first victory. "Signal the convoy to stop and prepare for boarding," Zektar ordered. "Standard protocol. If they surrender quietly, we will take them prisoner. If they resist, destroy them." The communications officer sent the message. Zektar expected the humans to stop immediately. Every other species did when faced with Valdris warships. The smart ones knew they could not win against superior technology, but the human response surprised him. "Valdris vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty," came the reply in accented Galactic Standard. "We do not recognize your authority in human space. Withdraw immediately or we will consider you hostile." Zektar blinked in confusion. Had the translator made an error? This small human ship was threatening his entire battle group? He looked at the tactical display again. The human escorts were tiny compared to his destroyers. They had maybe 1/10 the firepower. "Did that human just threaten us?" asked Dralvin, his voice full of disbelief. "Apparently so," Zektar replied. He had never encountered such foolishness. "Open a channel to all ships. Prepare to engage the escorts. Leave the cargo vessels intact for now." The Valdris warships moved into attack formation. Zektar planned to disable the human escorts quickly, then board the cargo ships to capture supplies and prisoners. It should take less than 10 minutes, but Captain Morrison had other plans. "All cargo ships, this is Liberty," came Morrison's voice over the open channel. "Execute emergency jump to coordinates 77 Alpha. Tell Earth that the Valdris have arrived. Tell them we bought you as much time as we could." Zektar watched in shock as the human cargo ships suddenly accelerated toward the edge of the system. They were running for the jump point at maximum speed, but that meant the escorts were staying behind to fight against impossible odds. "Commander, the human escorts are moving to intercept us," reported Crestal. "They are charging weapons." 2 ships against 12? Zektar could not believe what he was seeing. Are they insane? The USS Liberty and her sister ship began firing, their primitive weapons at the Valdris formation. Their missiles were slow and their energy beams were weak. The shots bounced harmlessly off Valdris shields. It was like children throwing rocks at armored warriors. Zektar almost felt sorry for them. Return fire. Disable their engines, but try not to destroy them completely. I want to question these humans about their foolish courage. The Valdris destroyers opened fire with precise shots meant to cripple the human ships. But Captain Morrison did something that made Zektar's blood turn cold. Instead of trying to escape or surrender, Morrison turned his ship directly toward the nearest Valdris destroyer. The Liberty accelerated at maximum speed, heading straight for a collision course. "He cannot be serious," whispered Dralvin, but Morrison was completely serious. His ship slammed into the destroyer Thunderstrike at full speed. The impact tore both ships apart in a ball of fire and twisted metal. The explosion was so bright that Zektar had to shield his eyes. The second human escort, commanded by someone called Lieutenant Barry Hughes, immediately copied Morrison's tactic. Hughes rammed his ship into another Valdris destroyer, crippling it beyond repair. In less than 2 minutes, the humans had destroyed themselves completely, but taken out 2 of Zektar's best ships. The cargo vessels were already jumping to safety, carrying word of the attack to the rest of human space. Zektar stared at the wreckage floating in space. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. Species usually fought to win or to survive. They did not throw their lives away for no gain, but these humans had gained something. They had saved their cargo ships and warned their homeworld. They had chosen certain death to give their people a few extra hours to prepare. "Commander," said Crestal quietly, "I am reading massive communication bursts from human space. They are broadcasting on all frequencies. What are they saying?" Crestal looked confused as she read the translations. "They are not calling for help, sir. They are calling for volunteers. They want every human ship to arm itself and prepare for war." Zektar felt a chill run through his body. Most species begged for mercy when faced with Valdris invasion. They tried to negotiate or find ways to surrender peacefully. But these humans were doing the opposite. They were preparing to fight. "Set course for the nearest human colony," Zektar ordered, "and send a message to High Command. Tell them the humans may be more difficult than expected." As the Crimson Talon moved deeper into human space, Zektar could not stop thinking about Captain Morrison's last message. The human had died to buy his people time, but his final words echoed in Zektar's mind like a warning. "Tell Earth that the Valdris have arrived. Tell them we bought you as much time as we could." What kind of species chose death over surrender? What kind of warriors threw themselves at superior enemies without hesitation? Zektar had a growing feeling that he was about to find out, and he did not think he would like the answer. 3 days after the Jupiter incident, Zektar realized he had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not behaving like any enemy he had ever fought. Instead of hiding behind their defenses and waiting for the Valdris fleet to arrive, they had done something completely insane. They had declared war on the entire Valdris Empire. "Commander, we have lost contact with Forward Base Sigma," reported Crestal from her station. Her voice carried a note of worry that Zektar had never heard before. "That is the 4th outpost to go silent in the last day." Zektar studied the tactical map with growing confusion. Red symbols marked the locations of destroyed or damaged Valdris installations. The pattern made no sense. The attacks were happening all across Valdris space, not just near human territory. How were the humans moving so quickly? "Show me the sensor logs from Sigma Base," he ordered. The recording showed the last moments of the remote station. A small human ship had appeared without warning and begun firing missiles at the base's communication array. The ship looked like a converted cargo hauler, nothing that should threaten a military installation. But the human pilot, someone called Captain Lisa Parker, had somehow loaded the vessel with enough explosives to level the entire facility. Parker's ship had crashed into the base's main power reactor, destroying everything in a massive explosion. She had killed herself to eliminate a single supply depot, but the loss crippled Valdris operations in 3 nearby systems. "This is madness," muttered Dralvin. "Why would they sacrifice an entire ship to destroy one small base?" Zektar was beginning to understand, and the realization terrified him. The humans were not trying to win battles in the traditional sense. They were trying to make the war too expensive for Valdris to continue. Every human death was calculated to cause maximum damage to Valdris. Infrastructure. Another report arrived from the communications center. "Commander, Admiral Veltar requests immediate assistance at Kepler Station. They are under attack by human ground forces." Zektar's heart sank. Kepler Station was supposed to be impregnable. It was built inside an asteroid, protected by shield generators and automated defense systems. If humans had somehow landed troops there, the situation was worse than he thought. "Set course for Kepler at maximum speed," he ordered, "and send word to all nearby ships. We need every vessel we can get." The journey to Kepler took 18 hours. During that time, Zektar received constant updates about the battle. A human colonel named Ryan Brooks had led a team of Marines in a desperate assault on the station. They had used stolen Valdris transport codes to land on the docking bay, then fought their way through 6 levels of heavy defenses. The reports described combat that made no sense to Valdris military doctrine. The humans fought in small groups, using speed and surprise instead of superior firepower. They set traps in corridors, used explosives to collapse sections of the station, and worst of all, they never retreated even when facing certain death. Brooks himself had died in the final assault on the command center, but not before destroying the main computer core. The loss of Kepler Station left the entire Valdris fleet without central communications. Ships were scattered across dozens of systems, unable to coordinate their movements. When Zektar arrived at Kepler, he found Admiral Veltar standing in the ruins of what had been the most secure facility in Valdris space. The older commander looked like he had aged 10 years in one day. "How many humans did this?" Zektar asked. 43 Marines, Veltar replied in a hollow voice. 43 humans against a station defended by 800 Valdris soldiers. They should have been slaughtered in the first corridor. But they were not? Veltar shook his head slowly. They fought like demons, Zektar. They used tactics I have never seen before. When we cornered a group of them in the reactor chamber, they rigged the cooling system to explode rather than surrender. The blast killed them all, but it also took out 60 of my best troops. Zektar walked through the damaged station and tried to understand what had happened. The humans had not simply attacked. They had turned the station itself into a weapon, using its own systems against the defenders. Every corridor showed signs of improvised booby traps and desperate last stands. In the medical bay, he found evidence of something that chilled him to the bone. The humans had continued fighting even after being wounded. Dr. Nancy Williams, the human team medic, had been shot 3 times, but still managed to destroy the station's medical supplies before dying. She had denied the Valdris access to their own healing equipment out of pure spite. The humans are not fighting to conquer territory, Zektar told Veltar as they stood in the wreckage of the command center. They are fighting to destroy us. Completely. What do you mean? Look at their targets. They do not attack our colonies or resource worlds. They hit our supply lines, our communication hubs, our repair facilities. They want to break our ability to wage war. Reports continued to arrive from across the Empire. Human strike teams had hit 17 different targets in the last week. Each attack followed the same pattern. Small groups of humans would appear, without warning, cause maximum damage, and fight to the death rather than retreat. The humans had somehow weaponized their entire civilian population. Merchant ships carried hidden missile pods. Mining vessels became mobile bomb platforms. Even passenger liners emerged from hyperspace, bristling with hastily mounted weapons. A commercial pilot named Captain Danny Chun had converted his passenger transport into a flying bomb and crashed it into a Valdris battleship. The explosion had been visible from 3 systems away. Chun had died instantly, but he had taken 800 Valdris crew with him. They fight like they have nothing to lose, observed Dralven after reading another battle report. That is exactly the problem, Zektar replied. They do have nothing to lose. We are trying to conquer their homeworld. For them, this is not a war of conquest. It is a war of survival. The difference was becoming obvious. Valdris soldiers fought to complete missions and return home. They retreated when casualties became too high, regrouped when tactics failed, and surrendered when victory became impossible. It was logical and efficient. Human soldiers fought like every battle was their last. They used tactics that guaranteed their own deaths if it meant killing more enemies. They never retreated, never. Regrouped and never surrendered. It was completely insane, and it was working. Commander, said Crestal urgently, I am reading massive energy signatures approaching from human space. Multiple fleets moving toward our position. Zektar looked at the sensor display and felt his blood turn cold. The humans were not content to raid Valdris outposts. They were bringing their entire military to bear in one final assault. Ships were converging from every human colony, forming the largest fleet in their species' history. How many vessels? He asked quietly. Over 300 confirmed, sir, and they are all moving toward Earth. Zektar realized that the humans had been planning this from the beginning. Every raid, every sacrifice, every desperate attack had been designed to draw the Valdris fleet toward their homeworld. The humans wanted a final battle, and they were going to get one. The battle for Earth began at dawn on the 4th day of the 7th month. Zektar watched from the bridge of the Crimson Talon as the human homeworld grew larger on the viewing screen. The planet looked beautiful and peaceful, covered in blue. Oceans and white clouds. It was hard to believe that such a lovely world had produced the most terrifying warriors in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human defense fleet from her flagship, the USS Defiance. Zektar had studied her service record during the approach to Earth. Sullivan had started the war as a cargo ship captain, but 3 months of fighting, the Valdris had turned her into one of the most dangerous military commanders in human space. Enemy. Fleet positions confirmed, reported Crestal. The humans have 160 ships arranged in defensive formations around their planet. Zektar nodded grimly. The Valdris still had more vessels, but barely. What had started as a force of 300 ships was now reduced to less than 200. The human raids had cost him over 100 vessels in just 3 months of fighting. Signal all ships, he ordered. Begin the final assault. Target their orbital stations first, then move against their fleet. The space around Earth erupted in weapons fire as both fleets opened their attack. Valdris plasma cannons lanced out toward human ships, while human missile swarms filled the void between the battle lines. The first few minutes went exactly as Zektar expected. His superior weapons began picking apart the human defense fleet. But then, Admiral Sullivan did something that made Zektar's stomach turn with dread. Instead of maintaining her defensive positions, she ordered her entire fleet to charge directly at the Valdris formation. Are they trying to ram us again? Asked Dralven in disbelief. No, Zektar replied, watching the tactical display with growing horror. They are trying to get close enough that we cannot use our long-range weapons. The human ships accelerated to maximum speed, racing toward the Valdris fleet despite taking heavy casualties. Ship after ship exploded under Valdris fire, but the survivors kept coming. They wanted to turn the battle into a close-range knife fight, where their desperate tactics would be most effective. Human destroyer commanded by Captain Pete Collins broke through the Valdris line and began firing at point-blank range into a battleship. Collins kept shooting even as return fire tore his ship apart piece by piece. He died when his bridge exploded, but not before his weapons penetrated the battleship's armor and caused critical damage. "Focus fire on their flagship," Zektar ordered. "If we can destroy Sullivan, their fleet will lose coordination." But Admiral Sullivan had anticipated this tactic. As Valder's ships concentrated their fire on the Defiance, human pilot Danny Chun launched his fighter directly at the nearest enemy destroyer. Chun's small craft was loaded with explosives and programmed for a collision course. Zektar watched in shock as Chun's fighter punched through the destroyer's shields and slammed into the bridge section. The explosion killed Chun instantly, but it also wiped out the entire command crew of the enemy ship. Without leadership, the destroyer began firing randomly, hitting both human and Valder's vessels. "That pilot just destroyed his own allies, too." "Kill us," whispered Dralvin. "No," Zektar corrected. "He calculated that destroying one of our ships was worth the loss of a few human vessels. They think differently than we do." The battle turned into exactly the kind of chaotic melee that favored human tactics. Ships fought at knife-fighting range where skill and desperation mattered more than superior technology. Human crews boarded, damaged Valder's vessels while their own ships were breaking apart around them. Major Alex Rodriguez led a boarding party onto the battleship Eternal Glory. Rodriguez and his Marines fought their way through the ship's corridors using tactics that seemed designed by madmen. They used the ship's own atmospheric system to spread poisonous gas, turned the artificial gravity against the defenders, and rigged the life support systems to explode. Zektar received reports of the fighting inside the Eternal Glory with growing dread. Rodriguez was wounded and outnumbered, but he kept advancing toward the ship's reactor core. Every human Marine who died took at least 3 Valder's warriors with them. "Sir, the humans have breached our outer defensive line," reported the weapons officer. "Multiple enemy ships are moving toward our position." Zektar looked at the tactical display and realized the battle was lost. The Valdres had started with superior numbers and better weapons, but the humans had turned every engagement into a death trap. For every human ship destroyed, they managed to cripple or destroy at least one Valdres vessel. Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the communications channel, broadcasting to both fleets. "Valdres commanders, this is your last chance to withdraw. Leave our space now, or we will destroy every ship you have." "She cannot be serious," said Dralvin. "They are losing more ships than we are." But Zektar understood what Sullivan meant. The humans were willing to lose their entire fleet if it meant destroying the Valdres invasion force. They would fight until the last ship was gone, and they would take as many enemies with them as possible. A human cruiser commanded by Captain Sophie Turner rammed itself into the Valdres flagship, crippling the vessel that carried Admiral Valtar. Turner died in the collision, but her sacrifice eliminated the Valdres fleet commander and threw the entire enemy formation into confusion. Rodriguez finally reached the reactor core of the Eternal Glory. Zektar watched on the security monitors as the human major, bleeding from multiple wounds and barely able to stand, placed explosive charges around the main power coupling. Rodriguez looked directly into the camera and smiled before detonating the charges. The explosion tore the battleship apart from the inside. Rodriguez died instantly, but he took 800 Valdres crew members with him. The loss of such a powerful ship sent shock waves through the entire Valdres fleet. "Commander, we are receiving boarding pods," announced Crestal with panic in her voice. "Human Marines are attempting to board our ship." Zektar drew his weapon and prepared for the worst. He had seen what human Marines could do to a ship once they got inside. They fought with a combination of tactical skill and berserker fury that no Valdres warrior could match. The first human to reach the bridge was a female Marine named Lieutenant Carol Evans. She burst through the blast doors, firing her weapon and throwing explosives with deadly accuracy. Evans moved like a predator, using the bridge equipment as cover while picking off Valdris crew members one by one. Zektar tried to shoot her, but Evans was too fast and too clever. She used the bridge's own systems against the defenders, overloading power conduits to create explosions and rerouting environmental controls to fill sections with poisonous gas. "Fall back to the secondary bridge," Zektar ordered, but it was too late. Evans had already reached the main computer core and was placing demolition charges. The young human looked at Zektar with cold, determined eyes. "Your ship is finished. Alien, surrender now or die with it." Zektar realized he was looking at the future of warfare. These humans did not fight for glory or conquest. They fought for the complete destruction of their enemies, and they would sacrifice anything to achieve that goal. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Zektar stood before the Valdris High Council in chains. The great chamber echoed with angry voices as the Supreme Commanders tried to understand how their mighty empire had been brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as primitive savages. "Explain to us again how 300 warships were destroyed by barely 200 human vessels," demanded Supreme Commander Drake Tull, his voice filled with contempt. "Explain how our greatest military force in 5 centuries was defeated by aliens who learned to travel between stars only 50 years ago." Zektar looked up at the council members sitting in their high seats. These old warriors had never faced humans in battle. They still believed that superior technology and larger fleets guaranteed victory. They could not understand what Zektar had witnessed above Earth. "The humans do not fight like other species," Zektar said quietly. "They do not retreat when casualties become too high. They do not surrender when victory becomes impossible. They fight until they are all dead, and they take as many enemies with them as they can." "Cowards' words," spat Commander Grelver from the left side of the chamber. "You fled the battlefield and abandoned your duty. Now you blame our defeat on enemy tactics to hide your own shame." Zektar closed his eyes and remembered Lieutenant Carol Evans standing on his bridge with demolition charges in her hands. The young human had given him one chance to surrender before destroying his ship. When he refused, she had smiled and activated the explosives. Zektar had only survived because Evans chose to seal the bridge section before the blast. She could have killed him easily, but instead, she trapped him in a life pod and launched him toward the edge of the battle. He had watched from that tiny escape craft as his ship exploded and Evans died with it. "I did not flee," Zektar said. "The humans allowed me to escape. They wanted someone to return and tell you what happened." "Ridiculous," declared Supreme Commander Draktal. "Why would they spare a single enemy?" "Because they wanted you to know that resistance is futile," Zektar replied. "They wanted you to understand that surrender is your only option." The council chamber erupted in angry shouting. Several commanders demanded that Zektar be executed immediately for spreading defeatist propaganda. Others insisted he was suffering from battle madness and should be sent to a medical facility. But the truth was already spreading throughout the empire. Reports arrived daily from the frontier worlds. Human fleets were advancing into Valdris space, liberating enslaved populations, and destroying military installations. Everywhere they went, the humans offered the same choice: surrender peacefully or be destroyed completely. General Peter Collins commanded the largest human invasion force, leading over 400 ships deeper into Valdris territory. Collins had been a simple cargo pilot before the war, but months of fighting had turned him into a strategic genius who understood exactly how to break the Valdris Empire. Instead of conquering worlds for human colonization, Collins freed the enslaved. species and gave them weapons to fight their former masters. The Zelanians, the Kordak, the Valian Republic, all the races that the Valdus had conquered over the centuries, were now rising in rebellion. Admiral Sophie Turner led another human fleet that specialized in hunting down Valdus warships. Turner had developed new tactics based on the lessons learned at Earth. Her ships worked in small groups, using speed and surprise to overwhelm isolated enemy vessels before they could call for help. The humans have turned our own conquered species against us, reported Intelligence Commander Valkaris. 47 worlds have declared independence in the last month. Our empire is collapsing. Supreme Commander Draktal slammed his fist on the council table. How can primitive aliens defeat an empire that has lasted for 3,000 years? Zektar knew the answer, but he also knew the council would not accept it. The Valders had grown soft during centuries of easy conquests. They had forgotten how to fight against an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. The humans do not want to rule our worlds, Zektar explained. They want to destroy our ability to conquer other species. They will keep fighting until the Valders Empire no longer exists. Then we will build a new fleet and crush them, declared Commander Grelver. We will recruit soldiers from every world and overwhelm them with numbers. With what soldiers? Asked Valkaris quietly. Half our military bases have been destroyed. Our recruitment centers have been bombed. The humans have systematically eliminated our ability to wage war. Zektar had seen the reports from the outer systems. Captain Nick Evans, the human officer, who had survived the Jupiter convoy attack, now commanded a liberation fleet that was approaching the Valders core worlds. Evans remembered the sacrifice of Captain Morrison and the crew of the USS Liberty, and he was coming to finish what they had started. We could negotiate a peace treaty, suggested one of the younger council members. Surely the humans would accept our surrender if we offered favorable terms. Have you been listening? Zektar asked in disbelief. The humans are not interested in treaties or favorable terms. They have seen what the Valdus Empire does to conquered species. They will not stop until we are no longer capable of threatening anyone. The truth was that humanity had declared a war of extermination against the Valders way of life. They would accept nothing less than the complete dismantling of the empire, and this liberation of every enslaved world. Supreme Commander Draktal stood up slowly, his face showing the weight of 3,000 years of imperial history. What do you recommend? We do? Surrender now, while some of our people might survive? Zektar replied. The humans do not kill civilians or destroy planets, but they will eliminate every military installation and government facility until the empire ceases to exist. The council voted to strip Zektar of his rank and exile him to a mining colony on the edge of Valders space. They refused to accept his warnings or consider surrender. Instead, they began planning desperate last stands and futile counterattacks. Zektar spent his remaining days working in the mines and listening to news broadcasts from across the galaxy. One by one, the great fortress worlds of the Empire fell to human assault fleets. One by one, the enslaved species declared their independence and joined the human alliance. The end came exactly as Zektar had predicted. The humans did not destroy planets or massacre civilians. They simply eliminated every symbol of Valders authority and gave the conquered species the tools they needed to govern themselves. On the day the last Valders fleet surrendered, Zektar received a message from Captain Nick Evans. The human officer had kept his promise to return, and now he offered safe passage to any Valders civilians who wanted to start new lives in human space. Zektar looked up at the stars and realized that the humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not just defeated an empire, they had liberated an entire galaxy from 3,000 years of oppression. He was the only Valdris military officer to survive the war, exactly as the humans had planned. His survival served as a warning to any species that might consider following the Valdris path of conquest and enslavement. The message was simple and terrifying. If you fight humans, only one of you will come back alive to tell the story.